If you've ever dreamed of quitting your day job and making knitting your full-time job, I can tell you, I shared that dream. But I came to find out that my dream job wasn't everything I had dreamed it would be. So here's the full story of how I got my job working as a knitting book editor and why I quit. Our story begins the summer before I left for college. That's the summer that I taught myself to knit. Knitting became such an integral part of my personality in such a short period of time that by the time I started school in September, I was knitting away pretty constantly. I started to think that this might be something I wanted to do professionally. So I thought about different paths that I could take to making knitting my job. The people in my life were kind of confused. They thought that maybe I wanted to knit hats and sell them at markets for a living or to open an Etsy shop, but that wasn't what I was thinking. I wanted to work in the knitting industry. And in my mind, the forefront of the knitting industry at the time, the year was 2009, 2010, was Vogue Knitting magazine. After college graduation, that was the place that I wanted to be working. And so I decided to make that internship happen for myself. I did some research, I looked on their website, I didn't see any listings for internships, and so I did what any bold and confident college student would do. I started LinkedIn messaging people whose profiles said they worked at Vogue Knitting magazine. And lo and behold, someone did respond. A couple of things had to align in order for this to happen. I happened to be going to school in New York City, so I was local to the Vogue Knitting offices, but also I had to have a little bit of chutzpah that made me feel confident enough to cold message and reach out to people I had never met who worked at this magazine. So a little bit of luck, a little bit of chutzpah. I got an unpaid internship at Vogue Knitting magazine. And every Friday, I did not have classes and I would take the subway down to Soho. I could show up and be asked to knit the placket onto a baby sweater, to sew buttons onto a garment, to proofread pages for upcoming books, and even to take a bunch of garments to a photo shoot in a different part of the city. So I got a lot of different pieces of what Vogue Knitting did. The year that I was an intern at Vogue Knitting was the very first year that they were having an event called Vogue Knitting Live. It's a huge event that happens in multiple locations, but this was the very first one happening in Times Square. It was such a special and cool time to be a part of this industry. And I met a lot of really cool people. Knitting celebrities would just walk through the offices, and I remember being totally starstruck. One Friday, I was pulled aside and told that a member of the staff was having a baby, and everyone had agreed to knit a square for a blanket they were going to gift her, but no one had finished it in time. And I spent that entire Friday knitting squares for a baby blanket. So it was kind of a toss-up what was going to happen on any given Friday. And at the end of my internship, the yarn editor kindly pulled me aside, asked me what kind of yarn I like, went into the yarn closet and filled a bag of yarn for me to take home. Honestly, I would have probably done another internship there, but I felt it was important to diversify my internship experience. Vogue Knitting magazine did a lot of their book and magazine content in-house, but they partnered with a book publishing company in the city to produce their books. That's where I went next. And I wound up doing 2 internships in a row at that book publishing company. I'm not directly working on any knitting content. I'm not working on any craft content, but I am experiencing the book publishing world. And something that was always on my mind is that this book publishing company had a craft division, but it wasn't in the New York office. I was in the New York office. The craft publishing division was based in Asheville, North Carolina. And so I started to formulate a plan. If my number one goal of becoming an editor at Vogue Knitting magazine did not come true after college graduation, I would have a plan B, which was to move to Asheville, North Carolina and become an editor at Lark Crafts, which was the name of the imprint or the segment of the company that did crafts. College graduation comes around, and it's time for me to start applying for jobs. I applied to lots of different types of jobs, but there were only a few that were really in consideration for me. One was Vogue Knitting magazine. That was my top choice, and I reached out to them and I tried to connect with them to get a job there, but that just didn't work out. It didn't come together, but I was offered a job at the book publishing company where I had been an intern, and I decided to take that role. And 1 year later, something very sad, but lucky for me, happened. The publishing company I was working for decided to dissolve the craft division in North Carolina. And I was devastated because one of my goals had always been to work my way up into moving down to Asheville and being a part of that craft team. They decided to move the imprint, the division, and all the books involved up to the New York office and build a small, scraggly team to work on those craft books there. And I was pulled in to become one of those editors. I had manifested this dream of making knitting my job, and I was working on some other crafts too. I did a paper cutting card book, I did a mason jar crafts book, I did a lot of different craft books, but ultimately I was working on and working with craft every day. And it was at this point that I started to realize that things weren't feeling as wonderful as I had hoped they would. So let's talk about some of the things that went wrong as I worked my way into my dream job as a knitting book editor. First of all, publishing is an old school industry. Creative fields in general are not known for being very lucrative, but publishing especially is not a lucrative field. And so as I was working my way up, I was not earning enough money to live independently in the city. I was living in my parents' house in New Jersey. I was commuting 2 hours in each direction into the city, and I wasn't earning enough to live. In fact, 2 years into working in publishing, I got the opportunity to move into a rent-stabilized apartment in Brooklyn, and I couldn't even afford to stay there because I was getting paid so little. It really felt devastating to have to just realize that I couldn't support myself despite how hard I was working. One of the higher up editors, like a senior editor, I remember her telling me that her son was making more money than her in his first job out of college. And I remember just being horrified to realize that I could put in that many years, decades of work, and still not really make enough money to survive was really, really upsetting to me. One of the most devastating parts of this whole process was that working in craft publishing made me lose my love of both craft and books. The thing that had brought me peace, the thing that made me feel like myself, the thing that was such a core part of my identity, the thing that I used to come home at the end of the day and do to relax, no longer felt relaxing. It felt stressful. It felt like something I wanted to escape from. And after working a 12-hour day, thinking about knitting and thinking about books, the last thing I wanted to do was knit when I came home from work. I wanted to veg out. I wanted to scroll on my phone, and I didn't like that version of myself. I hadn't knit for fun in a while. When I started to realize that I was losing the love of the thing that I thought I wanted to do, that old saying, do what you love and you never work a day in your life, wasn't resonating with me anymore, I decided it was time to make a change. I settled on trying out teaching. It took a little bit of time, but after I transitioned out of publishing, I started to rediscover my love of knitting. Without the pressure of making it a job, without the pressure of having to do it every day, whether I wanted to or not, knitting became fun for me again. So would I ever make knitting my job again? I'm wary. I'm not saying it's a no, but I would definitely be hesitant before I tried to make knitting a job again, because I wouldn't want to burn out and lose my love of it the way I had before. At the end of the day, I'm grateful for the professional experience I got working in the industry. And now if I ever explored that world again, I know what to watch out for so that I wouldn't wind up in the same bad headspace that I wound up in the first time. If you found this video helpful or interesting or entertaining, don't forget to hit the like button to let me know you liked it and subscribe so you don't miss a future one. And let me know in the comments, would you ever take a job in the knitting industry, and did this video change your mind at all? Let me know, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.